And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Descent: Legends of the Dark. I have a lot of history with Descent. The original game, which was a follow-up to a game from Fantasy Flight called Doom, was a dungeon crawl. There are dozens and dozens of dungeon crawls, but 15 years ago, there was basically one defining one, which was Descent. They eventually added a campaign mode to the game, and then Descent, the second edition. So in essence, when we heard about this one, it was like, ooh, the third edition of Descent, but that is not the case here. They said that when they announced the game, that this is not the third edition of Descent. This is kind of a Descent game, but it goes off differently. And that's very true. This game is much more similar to Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition and The Lord of the Rings Journeys of Middle-earth. And that's because this game heavily depends, in fact, more than heavily depends, on an app, which I've been running an early version of the app to test this out on the computer, but it's going to be available on other devices also. You're going to be playing it together as a group or solo through a campaign, using from a group of 6 different characters to go through and fight enemies and do different things, but following an app. So in this review, we want to take that into account. Look, I want to be really clear. I'm not going into this game. I didn't go into this game expecting Descent 3. I have no baggage. If I want to play Descent, I have 2nd edition and everything for it. So I know this is a new game, so let's dive into that. But to do so, we got to turn on the app first. So this is the app when you pull it up, and you can play a previously done campaign, or you can start a new campaign. So here we put in the party name. We'll call it the Dice Tower People. All right. So anyway, whatever you call your thing. And then you can pick the difficulty. Now I will say so far I've only played on standard difficulty. I don't really like games that are tremendously difficult. I found the game pretty decently tough here on standard. Not the basic quest, but you pick this, and so then it kind of takes you to this loading screen. You have to click continue down here, something I missed all the time, because they made continue, and that looked the same. And at this point, it goes through a story. There's some voiceover work here at the beginning of this story, but that's pretty much it. I don't want to kind of really show too much of this story, although this kind of stained glass window artwork I really like. I want to point this out because I don't like all the artwork in this. But it talks about this. Anyway, I'm going to skip the story for now. But what it's going to do here is it gives you kind of a background. And it's going to have the different characters start talking to each other. And I want to mention this because this is one aspect of the game that I really don't like. First of all, not a fan of the artwork of the characters. That's very much a personal taste thing. I get that. Although this one's not so bad. In fact, this particular character is my favorite. But I don't like how they do this dialogue here. So basically you can see here at the bottom, it's this person here is talking, and then this person comes up and talks back. And honestly, I really dislike this because it will also sometimes have text at the bottom that is not quote. They don't put the people talking in quotes. They don't really have different voices, and there's a ton of this talking. So then here you pick like an option which doesn't matter at all at the beginning, but they do matter later on. But the dialogue I found to be very... I didn't like it. I didn't like the stories of this game very much. I don't like the dialogue back and forth. And also, there is a ton of this dialogue before you get to the main game. So, you know, here I'm just trying to speed through the dialogue. Then you get to a quest. Now, many quests in this game have a required hero. There are 6 possible heroes, but you always have to pick at least 2. So even if you're playing solo, which I did play a lot, you have to go through with 2 people, but you can pick all 4 of these people. And at this point, they might give you something here that says, who's on watch? And you pick somebody. And then it's going to talk a little bit about different things going on. This is the tutorial app, and this is going to show you how you place the map up. So you're going to follow this. You're going to look for these tiles and place the map on the board. Now, before we get into this much more, I want to take a look at the characters. There are 6 characters that you'll be playing throughout the game, and you'll play with all of them, actually. They have different things on here. When they take a move action, that's how far they move. This is their starting hit points, and in this game, you have little dials that will keep track of your hit points. This shows you what dice you'll use on both attack and defense. There are 3 different dice in the game. Sometimes you have to make a test in the game, and these numbers modify your test. This is the number of fatigue this card can hold, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is a special ability, and down here is a surge special ability that you have. This also shows what kind of armor you can wear, so this shows heavy armor. And each character has all sorts of different things that they can do. So let's also take a look here at Galadin. Each person's going to start. By the way, this is my least favorite art in the entire game. I don't dislike this character and how they play it. I just dislike this art a lot. Although, again, this is the dumbest helmet, not in this game, but in any game I've ever seen. Anyhow, each character comes with some starting weapons. So, for example, Galadin here starts with the mirror blades and a bloodwood bow. They both have an upgraded side to them, but you don't start with them upgraded. So you're going to put them back to back in a sleeve like this. And the reason you do that is because over the course of a battle, you're going to be able to flip back and forth. On a player's turn, they're going to have 3 actions. One of those actions will be moving on the board, and the other 2 could be moving again. But usually the other 2 might be attacking, but you can also flip your cards that you have. Now, there's a couple reasons you're going to do this. You have your own character card, you have a weapon, and as the game goes by, you also have like special abilities that you get from leveling up. So this one here, for example, costs 1 experience point, and I might have this card next to the board too. So over the course of the game, you're going to do various things that are going to cause fatigue to be put on the cards. Each card has a fatigue limit. So he has, 3 fatigue limit I can put here, 1 fatigue, and 1 fatigue here. I don't want to take more than that. That can cause damage. But one of the actions a player has is ready. So when you take that action of ready, you'll take all the tokens off a card and flip it to the other side. Now, if you do it to your character, your special abilities are going to change. If you do it to this, again, and your weapon will change. Because I might want to use these mirror blades, which are going to do 3 damage for each success, and have slash in this special ability. But I might want to use the bow, which has a range of 4. It only does 2 damage. So these are probably better in hand-to-hand combat, but sometimes you want to shoot. So you can switch back and forth, but it takes a whole action to do so. Let's take a moment and talk about terrain. This is the bottom half of Descent, the box, and this is entirely full of terrain. It takes up the entire box. Now you have a lot of terrain pieces that are double-sided, and they have little numbers on them so that you can build the map. You also have these underlays which show different kinds of terrain, and these are really thin. I don't like these at all, but they're to be put underneath something. So for example, you could do this here, and okay, there's some lava here next to the bricks. Now inside here is a ton of extra terrain, and in this you have to build all this ahead of time. The game comes with a sheet of paper that shows how to build everything, all the different terrain pieces. And this took me an hour, and I didn't even, and I don't have it shown here, I don't even have the big dragon statue that the game comes with. It built in this box. But this took a really long time, and I disliked every single second of it. I didn't like putting all this together. I also don't like how this stores. It does fall apart a little bit. You're going to need to probably glue it together, or some of it's just going to fall apart. But the reason this terrain is here is because you're going to be placing different terrain pieces, like for example a tree, on the tile. And the good thing about this is when you interact with something, you can interact with almost every piece of terrain. You're going to run into the same terrain over and over again. You're going to run into trees all the time. You're going to run into bookcases all the time, lecterns, cauldrons, etc. And so if you see that there, you know you can interact with it in the app. Well, that's all well and good. They also have levels in this game. So there's these pillars, there's small pillars and large pillars. These pillars can attach here to the sides of the terrain where it will stand up and be above other terrain. And then you will use these steps here to go up into the terrain. The terrain here is obviously a feature of this game, and as you set it up, and I'll show you a setup in a second, as you set it up, it looks really cool. But man, I have a problem with it. First of all, it is a good chunk of the box. It's a chunk of the price here. I don't think it's worth that much. I would have been okay with a picture of a tree if that would have cut the cost of the game down that you interacted with. And while it looks cool, setting it up and tearing it down is very problematic, especially the 3D element. The whole thing about the Descent here is, oh look, it's 3D levels. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but I could have just put the two things next to each other and put stairs in between. The stairs and going from one level to the next is essentially the same as a door. That's really the only difference, except that sometimes in a higher level you can jump down from the higher level to the lower level. Bad guys tend to do that sort of thing. Or there might be a rope that pulls you up. But this terrain, which is the crowning achievement of this game, that and the app, right? They're the two big things that are going to attract people. I just found the terrain to be a pain in the neck. But that being said, I do like that when you set it up, it does look cool. There's no denying that. So in this game, you're going to be interacting with terrain. So there are different things, like you'll put site tokens here, and you might have someone interact with one if they just walk by it. And every space next to this will interact to that. So you do that, you'll get rid of the site token, and what it does is it then puts stuff on the map. And by the way, you can move around the map here. You can't rotate, which I thought was a little odd. At least I can't find a way to rotate. But there are some really good things about this map. So this tells you, hey, put a tree on, you know, and then it talks about, this is the tutorial still that it's talking about. And aha, it shows you where to spawn a monster. Although you've got to be careful here when you spawn the monster. Well, as soon as I click continue, that monster no longer shows up in the app because the monsters are going to be moving around and attacking you. And it will show you how monsters attack. It shows you where your people start. And boom, now we have a new objective, fight the enemies. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So here you can see the map is slowly growing. Now I do want to say a couple good things about this. One thing I like about the app is I can click on different types of terrain, like water here. And it says when spending movement to move out of water space, a hero or enemy must spend one additional movement point. That's great. I like being able to do that. Another thing here, I'm sorry, it's in this one, is line of sight. If you pick a spot on the board here, it will show you what spots that can see. There are rules about line of sight, but what do I care? I just pick a spot, and what spots can that see? So if I'm here, I'm adjacent to all the red spots. If I have a weapon with reach, I can get to the orange spots, and any yellow spot is within line of sight. Like this square in the back area, I can't see. This is fantastic, and it saves you a lot of arguments over whether something's in line of sight because the app just shows you. So I'm a big fan of that. The app also, like I said, every piece of terrain is interactable. So I can click on this tree, and you can spend an action to do that. So, oh, you'd have to drag a hero up to do this. They would have to be adjacent to it. And then you have options here. I could try to climb the tree. I could forage the plants, pick the fruit. I might forage the plants, and that gives me a bunch of resources. We'll talk a little bit more about what those resources are used. They're used between missions and not during a mission. So this is what the first scenario might look like to some degree. You can see that it's using up a lot of space, and this is not even everything in it. I'm not showing you all the different things that are here, but you're going to be moving your heroes around. You'll be fighting enemies, and like I said, there's different things to interact with, and you can see a little bit about what the 3D terrain might look like. And so you'll go through doors. There might even be a door here at the top of the steps. There's just different things that will happen when you interact the door. It will open up a new room. So the next thing I want to kind of take a look at, so you see the 3D terrain, and I talked about the enemies. So a big part of this game is going to be combat. How does that work? So here we have combat, and what you'll do when you are in range of someone and want to attack them and have an action where you can do so, you'll drag your hero to show that you're attacking that creature. You're going to pick which of your weapons you're going to use. And it's going to be the weapon that you're equipped with. Remember, you can take a ready action to kind of switch between your two different weapons. So I say I'm going to use this one. So now it shows a little bit here. Here I'm fighting a Zealot. At the top, you can see the Zealot has 18 hit points and has 1 armor. It has weaknesses to something. I don't know what type. Hopefully it's the crush damage, which my weapon tends to do. So now I'm going to be rolling dice and using my special abilities to get a certain number of successes. There are 3 different types of dice included in this game: a 6-sided, an 8-sided, and a 12-sided. Having more sides is not necessarily better. In fact, a 6-sided is the most solid of all the dice. Bryn here, who's attacking, uses a 6-sided to attack. So I'll roll the die. Here I've gotten 3 successes. There are different sides of dice that you'll get. You'll get stars, which are successes. There are also little plus symbols. So this is 2 successes, and these plus symbols, those can be converted into successes, but at the cost of putting fatigue on your objects, as long as you can afford to do so. Then there is a surge symbol, and this is not on all the sides of this one. In fact, you'll have that show up more often on the 12-sided die. It does less damage, but the surge, if I roll this surge symbol, I can use a surge special ability. Here it says add a success and an adjacent hero may discard 1 fatigue. Here I can just spend 2 fatigue on my weighted warhammer to, during your attack, add 1 success. After this attack, you may move the enemy 1 space from you. So at the beginning, remember I rolled 3 successes. So I'll say, okay, I rolled 3 successes. I'm going to spend 2 on here to add a 4th success. I could also do this to do something here. No, I don't want to do any of that. So 4 successes I've done to this enemy. So then you simply go here on the screen and you'll say, okay, I did 4 successes. Sometimes a weapon might do something else. It might cause them to be afflicted, enfeebled, dazed, exposed, doomed, slowed. What does all that mean? You don't need to know. The app takes care of that for you. So I do 4 successes and I confirm. Boom! I just hit the enemy for 11 damage. You can even click on this arrow here to show you how I did that damage. So I did 4 successes. Each one does 3 damage. So I did 12, and they blocked 1 of it, so it's a total of 11. And had they been weak to my type, it would have shown that. I don't have to worry about that. I click continue. Now maybe I have a second attack, so I might say I'm going to hit him again, and I'm going to use my thing again, and this time I get 2 successes. So I would do 2 successes, or let's say 3 successes, because I want to kill him. So I get another 3 successes, and I attack them. 9 damage, they're dead, and now it tells me to pull them off the board. Now, each enemy has special abilities too, and you can also go to a different screen here where it just shows the enemy. And when you attack an enemy, and so let's say Sirius attacks them with a glimmering ram, it shows you their special abilities. So this says, for example, these guys, after the attack, they shift 2 away from the hero, which means basically they move 2 spaces away from you. So I hit them for 4 damage. And then it will even remind you here in the app, and this is a really nice thing. It says, hey, they move 2 spaces away from you. And if they have other special abilities, like a 50% chance of something happening, the app takes care of that for you. Now, between rounds, after all the heroes have gone, and each hero, like I said, has actions where they can move and then 2 other actions, you're going to end the phase, and then the darkness phase happens. And the computer will keep track of different things that might happen. Here it says resolve infection and terror. These are things that will cause different effects to happen to you, and each one does something a different way. Each hero can discard 1 of their fatigue, which is a big deal. And then it will tell you how the enemy will attack. It tells you who they target. And each enemy has movement, range, and attack. They will target that person, but if someone else is closer, they'll go for that person instead. And again, it tells you what they do. They're going to do 4 damage. And here, you will simply roll a die for your defense, and the number of successes you use, and again, you can add fatigue and all that stuff, will subtract from the damage that the enemy does to you, and you keep track of your damage. If you take enough damage, and by the way, there's an interrupt button here in case you have some way you can interrupt the enemy's attack. If you take enough damage that your hit points go down to 0, then you're wounded. You'll pick your character, and you just say wound hero. Are you sure? Yes. Then they'll gain an injury. An injury card is a card that you add that will do a negative benefit to you. If you get injured again, the same character, and you can see they're kind of bloody down here, and I wound them again, you'll flip that injury card to a worse degree, and then if you wound them again, that takes them out of the game and you'll lose the mission. I want to pause right here and say how much I like this part of the game. I love the combat in this game. I love this this is definitely a take on the system from the Lord of the Rings Journeys of Middle-earth, but I like not having to know what everything does. This weapon has Pierce. Okay, fine. Pierce just works automatically in the app. And one of the things that this game does is, as you go between missions, you're going to be able to upgrade your weapons. You'll be able to add different parts to your weapons, and they'll do something like, it will say, your weapon now has a 20% chance to stun the enemy. I never have to remember that. The app just says, hey, it worked. And then the flipping the cards back and forth, getting rid of the fatigue, or just switching between weapons to weapons, using special abilities, that is a huge strategic part of the game. That is my favorite part of this. I think the combat here is really entertaining, and not every mission is 100% combat. There are things like find your way through a lost area, throw a rope down, pull people up, jump from here to here, do this, open this gate, look through the bookcase, discover some clues. But it's mostly combat. There's a lot of combat. Enemies constantly show up. You'll play missions where the enemies just keep showing up until you do something or fight them off. But the combat part I just find to be really fantastically done. I really like it. Now, you're going to finish a quest by succeeding or failing. So in this particular case, I failed the quest. It tells me how long I took to play it, and it tells me all the different items I've gotten. And I got all kinds of different items. Some of these things are going to become cards. Some of these things are recipes. But when you're done with this, it's going to take you back to the city. And so you're going to be going to this city between different rounds, and it will follow, this is the map of the game. And so you'll follow this little Indiana Jones pathway, and sometimes you'll hit a point, it will give you a little story and give you just random items. I still haven't found any rhyme or reason to these random events. I never felt like there was danger on the roads themselves. But when you get to the city itself, it's going to take you through a story to some degree. And I don't want to we're going to kind of zoom through the story here because I don't want to show too much of the story. But there is a story that's going on, and you interact with various characters, and they just pop up on the screen, which really reminds me of like a video game. Here's the 2 new characters join your party, blah, blah, blah. And so you go through these things. And I want to say there's a lot of reading here between rounds. But I want to show you, here you get some, it shows you get some, those experience cards I showed you. You get skills. But let's talk about what you can do in town between turns. So there's 3 places to go to. So we'll start over here, and this is where the craft hall, and this is where you can craft things. So it will tell you of a recipe. So there's different recipes I can get, and I look down here, and there's screamer bolts. I can add these to this character's weapon. I need various materials to do so. I have them. I have 3 metal, 4 minerals, 4 curios, and 1 anemones, whatever. So I can craft that. And now the app just knows that I have it. I would like to craft maybe this talon pommel, but I don't have enough metal, I don't have leather, and I don't have enough anemones to do so. So that's what you do here, is you craft stuff. Here is like a store where you can buy things back and forth. So I might say, ooh, I might want to buy this spiked grip. It costs 120 gold, I have 13. Or I might want to buy a Cloak of Sorrow, which is an armor card I can add to someone. I don't have enough money to do that, but I can, so a couple things here. First of all, you can buy these different various items that you need, but I can also sell. And I'm like, ooh, I have 61 herbs. I don't need 61 herbs. So let's sell, I don't know, let's sell 40 of them. So that's 160. Now, let's see, what else can I sell? I'll sell some of these curios. So I'll sell, 15 of these curios. Well, now I have 233 gold. Well, that's neat. So now I can go back here and decide whether I want to buy something. I'm going to buy this piece of armor. It's 200. So now I can use that armor. But you can also go here to the armory itself. Now, what the armory does is you'll go through the different characters in the game. And at this point in the game, you'll have the 4 main characters. And you're going to pick what weapons they use. Now, you'll notice there's really no picking here, except he found an extra weapon. Instead of using the Riverwatch spear, I can use the Sun-Forged sphere. And then if you have different halves and tails to these weapons, you'll be able to switch here too. I don't happen to have any of these yet, but you'll get a lot over the course of the game. And so, like I said, you can affect these weapons and pick them. And then when you're done, you will eventually leave the city. and it will show you the map here. And you'll notice that I have 2 quests here. These are both main quests, although it is very possible that you will also have side quests show up. When you do a quest, you'll click prepare. This one shows you that you must use this hero in this quest, and then you can kind of add whatever heroes you want to take this quest. You continue. You can pick the weapons that they have. In this case, they all have kind of the weapons that you're going to use. There's extra items that you might be able to add to them to give special abilities. But right now, this is kind of what you have. You can go in again and look at all the different characters, but that's basically what you're going to do from round to round. I'm not going to show you anything else at this point from the app, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of how it works. All right, the rest of this here then is going to be my opinions on everything that we've talked about. So this is a big game. I've played this a lot. I played it with the guys here in the studio, but I've also played, I played a ton of this solo. I played that intro quest, I think, 5 times now. But I played lots of different quests in the game. Off the top of my head, I want to say I played 9 to 10 different quests, maybe more than that. It started blurring together at the end. There's a lot going on. And so this game has gotten a lot of buzz around it, both positive and negative, and a lot of the buzz comes from the app. Now, we talk about this a lot when we are reviewing board games. There's a lot of board games that use apps with them, and some games use it more than others. Like, for example, Chronicles of Crime. If you don't have the app for Chronicles of Crime, you don't have a game. Well, that is 100% the case here. If you don't have the app for this, you don't have the game. You have to use that app. That you do need physical stuff. You can't just play on the app for sure, because you need to roll dice and you need to keep track of where the enemies are. That being said, there were a couple times near the end of the campaign where I was getting weary, like hour 14 or 15 into the campaign, and I just pulled out a couple pieces of terrain and put the enemies on them and move them around a little bit just so I knew where they would be, and I didn't bother setting up this whole big 3D terrain thing and just used the app to interact with stuff and just said, virtually, I'm here and here. This is one. So let's talk about negatives and positives. I want to start with the positives, and then we'll go on. So the positives for me is it uses the app in combat. And I already mentioned I love the combat in this game. I really do. I like flipping the cards back and forth. I feel like the 6 different characters from a combat level and in battle are really neat. The Magician's my favorite one. I love getting upgrades for the weapons and sitting there going, ooh, do I want to find more loot when I kill enemies with this weapon? Or do I want to have the weapon that stuns the enemy or dooms the enemy? And there are lots of little tokens and different things, and it's not that complicated really at all. Combat in games can also be complicated. Here you roll a single die, and then you use fatigue and stuff to add as many successes as you can. The level of difficulty I found to be pretty straightforward, and I'm playing on standard, like I said. I would never go above and beyond that. But the combat itself and how it works with the app is a huge positive for me. I also personally like that in-between stuff where you go and buy and sell. However, this is a positive and a negative, and I'll tell you why. Because going by and selling in the different items that you have and upgrading your weapons and building this and buying that, it really reminds me a lot of video games, from Baldur's Gate to Breath of the Wild, whatever it might be. I really like that as one person. As a group, that is an exhausting, weird thing. We're like, we should sell 5 curios. I don't want to sell curios. I want to keep them, and this and that. And it's just not something a group does. That in-between stuff is really problematic if you have more than one player. When you have one player, you're fine. You're going, I'll do this, I'll buy this, I'll sell this. Like you do in a video game. Together, I didn't find that to work much at all. On the positive, this game is striking to look at. The miniatures are really well done. Slight negative, the miniatures are super spiky. Picking them up, pulling them out of the plastic container, I was constantly hurting my fingers doing that. Tom, you're a wimp. But I found that, and also, there's not a ton of different miniatures, but I think they're really well done. I think the enemies have very different viewpoints, and I don't know if the number of enemies is a bad or good thing. There's not that many different enemies. I like 6, 7 different enemies.
So I'm like, oh, I see the same enemies all the time. But it helps in this game because combat is so strategic to know, okay, there's that enemy. And that enemy sometimes takes only 50% damage. So what should I do? This enemy always runs away from us. This enemy always comes at us. So I kind of see a mix in between there. Those are my positives. Again, I like how it looks. But the negatives are this. First of all, the terrain. I already mentioned I didn't like putting that terrain together. I didn't like setting up and taking this game down all the time. I found that to be exhausting. It was a big chunk of each scenario, and I was like, oh, I got to build another thing here over and over and over and over again. And I didn't even think the terrain, like the boards themselves, I don't think they look that great. I'm okay with the puzzle pieces from the original Descent. This whole 3D thing seems like a wow factor. Like if you walked in a convention and you saw it, you'd go, woo, I really want to play that. But I just was kind of I was over it after a while. I was like, oh, this is a lot of work. Secondly, I've said this too, I'm not a big fan of the characters, their story arcs, which are straight up tropes. Like, oh, I'm part of the Thieves Guild, but I'm leaving it, and they don't like me because of that. Whoa. I didn't think the writing here, this is again in my opinion, I didn't think the writing was very good. I didn't like the characters at all. The characters all sounded the same. And what was really weird was the one character who has an accent, like a Scottish brogue or something. When you click on their character, sometimes the characters shout things out, like a video game, you know. You click on them. That voice acting didn't match that brogue in the writing, and that was just weird to me. I never got invested in the characters, and honestly, I should have. There's not a lot of voice acting in this game. I really think they should have put more in. It really made me invest in these characters. When I played Baldur's Gate back in the day, Minsk and his little ferret, whatever it was called, I cared about those characters. I cared about the different characters in the game. I just don't care about these characters at all. I know one is the ugly elf archer, and one is the thief, and there's the magician, and then there's the Bronn with the helmet. And I think maybe Bryn. I'm sorry, Bryn has like maybe the most storyline in there. I just was not invested in this story, and until I got to a pretty critical juncture, there was a pretty big event that happens, and when I got to this event, I thought, meh. Let's go. It didn't strike me at all, and I feel like it should have. I will say at a certain point in the story, I was like, oh, I am in Terranoth, because it didn't feel like Terranoth at all at the beginning. But as time went by, they do bring back different things that I remember from other Terranoth games. But I'm just not sold on this story. And the app here is this thing, right? It's a big part of the game. The app, if you're playing it, now I play it on a computer because at this point in time, the computer is the only way I could play it. I'm playing a 0.9 version of this app. It's going to come out on iPad. I'm sure it's better on iPad, but everyone crowding around this app and looking at this app all the time, it's kind of a big deal. Here in the studio, I could put it up on the big TV, and we all looked at that, but not everyone can do that sort of thing, but I think you're going to have to try to like streamcast it to a TV or something so people can see it. But this really is kind of a video game with a bunch of terrain and some miniatures. There's not a lot in the game. There's about this many cards in the game. A few tokens, some spinners, some dice, some miniatures, and then tons of terrain, and then the app. So we come to price. I don't normally talk about price in games because people can afford different things, and maybe it's not even a big deal here. This game, the cheapest I could find it on any website is $140. Okay. You can argue that there's $140 worth of thing here. Like I said, I played 15 plus hours of this game. There's a lot of game here. But there's also a lot of dungeon crawlers that exist right now. Descent is no longer the only one. There's a lot out there. And I don't know that I want to play this over many of the other ones. I don't care about the one versus all. I tend to like one person being Dungeon Master, but I don't care. I like this app. I like how it works. But first of all, it plays very solo-y. And then if I'm going to play this game solo, I have to sit here and go, will I play this over Gloomhaven or many other different dungeon crawls that are out there? Is the system so cool and so neat that it's better than those? And I don't think so. If the app had amazing voice acting and all kinds of, maybe even little movie cut screens or whatever, but that app, at this point in time, I look at that app and it feels like when you look at the price, like the app is an $80 investment. I don't even pay $80 for a video game. at this point in time. And if I did, it better be one that looks better than this. So I don't know that the whole thing comes together in a must-buy. But I did enjoy lots of parts of this game. So for me, Descent Legends of the Dark is definitely a game that I'm going to play solo. I just don't, that in-between stuff is reading all that stuff. There's a ton of reading. Read. It's a whole lot faster for me to read it than it is for us to read it all out loud. There's so much, and there's no voice acting, so you have to read it all out loud more and more and more. It just plays better as a solo game, and also that buying and selling, I can do much better. So that works. The combat is really cool and interesting. The minis are good. It has a neat feel to it, but it doesn't feel like it stands out in a very crowded arena right now. And I'm not an app hater. I think that they can work in games, but this one in particular didn't overly impress me either. There were some things that are cool. There are feats that heroes can get from, if I shoot 2 different enemies with an arrow, I can get feats, and that gives you more recipes. That's neat. But again, that kind of feeds into the this is best solo. So it's fun, but I don't know that I can recommend it strongly. The price is very expensive. The app isn't amazing. I don't think the story, I like the characters, sort of. I don't have any problem with, they're not, you look at them, you're like, it's a different style artwork. They are very distinct characters. All that's good. But I didn't get that from the story. At the end of the day, they all turned into tropes anyway. So I was just kind of meh on that part of it. So I know this is a very mixed review, but there's a lot going on in this. At the end of the day, this may be one you just have to try out for yourself to see. Hopefully this helped you. Anyway, until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, and this is Descent Legends of the Dark on the Dice Tower. Dice Tower Judgment, very interesting.